Welcome to Before First Gear, a series where I sit down with top racers to learn how they got started, honed their skills, and some of the unique challenges they faced along the way. Every racer has a story, and I look forward to hearing it. Sergio Pena, thank you so much for joining me today. Sergio, a huge gamut of experience in NASCAR, about 7 years in ARCA, a whole bunch of experience in sport car racing, has spent a lot of time now working on the instruction side of things as a driving coach, developing your own school, it sounds like, which we'll learn a little bit more about, but just a great person to talk to about what it means to grow your career in motorsport, especially in NASCAR and sports car racing in the United States. So thanks, Jenna, for joining. And you said you're in Virginia right now, right?
Yeah, I am, Cole. I'm in Virginia. I'm in Winchester, Virginia. That's home base for me. It's actually where I grew up. So really close to Summit Point Lake Sports Park. You actually, if you see the track map in the background, that's one of Summit Point's tracks.
Okay.
So I'm really close. It's like 30 minutes down the road from my house.
Let's start from the very beginning. Tell me a little bit about how you started out in cars. Maybe was it karting?
So got a go-kart for Christmas. I think I was like 7 years old. I think it was a Christmas when I was, 6, 7 years old kind of time frame. It was a little tiny like kid cadet kart,
And then, so when was the first time that you actually got into a racetrack then?
So
I guess a karting track.
Yeah, first karting track. It was a little racetrack in Maryland called Monrovia Speedway. I couldn't tell you where it is on the map, but it wasn't too far from the house, maybe an hour and a half or so. Monrovia Speedway. It might not even be around anymore. Who knows? It might be a neighborhood at this point. But it was so crazy. The first time I drove the go-kart was in a snowy parking lot, and my little sister, Gabriella, who's 2 years younger than me, she actually drove it first, crashed it into a curb, and that was done for her. But so honestly, man, they had these little, there were probably 3 or 4 other kids kind of putting around the track. It wasn't like a super competitive race necessarily, but more so, here's an open track for young kids, and we would go around there and kind of putt around. And that was kind of how it all started. After a year or so of doing that at that track and racing with those other little kids there, we did basically enter into the Stars of Karting Championship, which used to be pretty serious heavy hitters. A lot of IndyCar drivers came up through that way. I'm not sure if Stars of Karting is still around anymore, but man, it was a super competitive series. Entered into that, and that's kind of where we were with the team. I was with like the official CRG team of the U.S., and I didn't necessarily have coaches there, but man, it was competitive enough to where you're racing around kids that know what they're doing, and you just kind of pick up on it.
And is that like around the United States at that point? That's a pretty high series as far as U.S. karting goes.
That was the pinnacle of U.S. karting at that time. This is like 2000 to 2005, 6 time frame is when I was racing there.
Okay.
So yeah, man, that was epic. And honestly, that's my favorite racing I've done in my life.
Someone was just telling me like at that, the high levels of karting, these guys are like rebuilding engines and like it's a pretty complex series at that point.
We would show up to a race weekend with I would have 3 chassis with 3 fresh engines. It was insane.
Wow. What's like, I don't know if you have any recollection or even know, but how expensive is a race weekend if you're doing that level?
I don't know. I thankfully had some sponsors and, was with the factory team. And so, probably very different for me than others, but
sure.
These days, man, I'm so out of touch with karting. I could not only imagine it would be more than, it'd be a 6-figure budget for sure.
Wow. So start as a karting. What was the next phase? That was 1 season you did that, 2 seasons?
I did that. Gosh, so I ended up winning the U.S. National Championship back-to-back years, 2002, 2003, and then I won the WKA, World Karting Association. I won their championship 2 years in a row, too. So I had 4 national championships under my belt. At this point, I was 11 years old, and it's like time to start thinking about Formula cars at the time. While I'm still racing go-karts, I mean, I'm only 11, so I couldn't move up into a competitive series yet.
Yeah.
So I did some testing in a Formula Renault, the 1.6 liter Formula Renault, and then I was racing in the kind of like the junior class, if you will. So the junior class
that was here. That was here in the United States. You did the Renault.
That was, yep, the U.S. Formula Renault. I don't think that series is around anymore either, to be honest with you.
I didn't even know they had that in the United States at the time.
Yeah, so I did a bunch of testing in Formula BMWs as well. I tested with Haverfield and Walker for a few sessions, wrecked one of their cars really bad. Actually, that's the worst crash I've ever had. Outside of NASCAR, I'd say. It was in one of their Formula BMW cars. But
What happened? Because at that point you're pretty young, right? You're like
Oh yeah, super young. I was at that time
13.
12. This is my mom. My mom was like, I've had it with you, and we'll get into my family history with this whole thing too. But I wrecked into a wall. Basically, it was like 125 miles an hour head on straight to the wall that she was standing behind.
Oh,
Knocked unconscious and taken to the hospital kind of thing. Yeah, it was a rough one. But basically, what happened was it was my first time on new tires. I'm just getting lap time, so we're not putting sticker tires on this thing or anything.
yeah.
And I was running some pretty competitive lap times apparently. So they're like, hey, let's throw some good tires on and see what he can do. And it was completely my fault. I kind of got a little oversteer. My left rear, it was coming out of the very last corner, which is a 90-degree right-hand turn. And, there's a long section of runoff, and then a guardrail kind of comes back in towards the track the further you exit the turn. Anyways, I got some oversteer, overcorrected, and just shot head on into this wall.
Oh, fuck, man.
That ended our test day. I ended up going to the hospital, had like a hairline fracture in my spine, and I was fine somehow. They were like, hey, recommend take some time, maybe a few months, like don't get in a car. And my dad was like, hey, I'm afraid, and the team as well. Everyone's like, hey, we're kind of scared that he's going to have some fear to get back in. So the very next day, right back in and kept going.
And there you go. At what point there, because I guess Formula BMW had some coaches on staff, like trying to understand how you went from karting. You obviously had a lot of success there, but when you get into a Formula car, it's a completely different experience. It's you have to learn how to drive an entirely new vehicle. It's a whole lot bigger. The dynamics are totally different. How did you actually go about learning how to do that?
So yeah, this leads to an awesome story.
Okay.
So I'm still currently racing go-karts. At this point, it was 2006 was the year. All right. My very last year full-time karting, and I'm doing some testing at Summit Point in the Formula Renault. Being that, and mind you, I wasn't homeschooled or private schooled like a lot of young racers were. I went to a public school here in Frederick County, Virginia. My mom is actually a teacher, so it was kind of tough balancing that school and racing thing. And how am I going to get seat time? How am I going to get practice? How am I going to learn this? Our plan was in 2007, when I was of age, I would enter in the U.S. Formula Renault Championship, right? So 2006, we do some testing, and basically what we would do is go to like their open track days at Summit Point, and we would sign up one of the guys that was wrenching on the car as the driver. You'd get a different color wristband before you get to the track. Then once we were in there, we'd cut the wristbands off. I would get the driver's wristband. I'd throw on my helmet with a dark, visor, and I'd go run the session. I'd go run all day, and no one ever knew.
Oh my God.
I honestly, honest to goodness, man, I had no formal coaching. When I first jumped into a Formula car, it was like, hey, I didn't even know the track. I didn't know where it went. This is before YouTube is a thing, so it's like, they're just like, go out there and don't crash and, don't push it either. Just go learn it. Those gearboxes were easy. It was a full sequential, no lift shift. It's not like you're, working clutches and all that crazy stuff. So, dude, it was crazy. I got kind of thrown to the wolves with it.
That's awesome. So then from there, after doing a whole bunch of illegal laps at some point, when did you kind of get into your first real race at that point?
But yeah, it was the very next year. I was of age to race the Formula Renault Championship, and we entered into it. And it was crazy, man. I won like the first 4 or 5 races of this championship. I ended up winning 11 of 20 races that year.
Wow.
Not necessarily having any coaching, man. I think what you take from karting can transfer over. Yeah, sure. Cars are heavier. Things happen kind of slow motion in a bigger, heavier car. So I think if you're just able to slow yourself down a little bit, as far as like your quick twitchy inputs, a go-kart, you turn this much and you're taking a pretty sharp corner where, Formula car, you're sometimes here, right? So
yeah,
if you can just kind of figure out to slow your hands down, understand when to shift, shifter carts helped a lot with that. And then a little bit of the aero stuff, some of the slides are slow. It's just everything happens a little bit slower. So I honestly think the transition from karting to a bigger, heavier car isn't that challenging because karting is so difficult, man. Karting is so difficult.
Okay, so at that point, you're like, what, 14? 15?
Yeah, I'm 14. Yeah, 14. Yep.
All right, 14. And then that series is running nationally. So you're flying around to, Laguna Seca, or you're in wherever, everywhere around the country?
Yeah, there were a lot of mostly West Coast. So we did a lot of Buttonwillow, Willow Springs, California Speedway. We did Miller Motorsports Park. Where else did we
That was
go?
in Utah, right? Miller
Yeah,
Motorsports Park.
Utah.
Yeah.
Awesome track, man. I wish that place kind of caught traction like they were planning on it.
Yeah.
They built that thing with Formula One in mind.
Okay, so 14, you're in Formula Renault. How big are the engines in those cars?
So there's two classes that run together at the time. They had the 1.6 liter and then they had the 2 liter.
Okay.
I was running the 1.6 liter. That's all I was old enough to do. But at the time, I was still the team that I was with. Actually, some buddies that we met in our final years of karting. They own a big taco shop actually in Los Angeles called King Taco. And so they helped sponsor me in my Formula cars. And they had a 2 liter. They had a 1.6 liter team. So, and they sponsored a Formula Atlantic team at the time
Wow.
when it
Okay.
was Camp Car Atlantic. So they had me, when I was 14, they had me testing Formula Atlantics, Formula 2 liter Renaults, and it helped me with the 1.6 liter so much because I was driving faster Formula cars all throughout the season.
Yeah.
Um, it was
Because
huge.
at the time, the ladder system that you were in, so it's the 1.6 and the 2.0. Then it was Formula Atlantic,
Yeah.
right? Then it was
Or
Pro
Formula Mazda,
Mazda.
you can kind of choose your route from there. They had Formula Mazda, Formula Atlantic would be a big jump.
Okay.
At that point, that car's got ground effects and serious power and
Like those are like little Indy cars at that point. Yeah, I mean, not even little. Those are almost Indy cars.
yeah, it was basically the like what Indy Lights is to IndyCar. This is the what it would be to Champ Car.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
And so at that point, kind of where's your head with, your father as well? It sounds like he was pretty integral in your career. Is
Yeah.
that like, all right, Sergio, we're looking to get you into IndyCar. We want to get you, where are we going with this?
Yeah, that's the crazy part, right? Like it's my dad was super involved, especially in karting. And then once we got up to, the Formula car level, it's just, it's hard. It's hard to afford anything, right? So, I mean, thankfully I had sponsors and, good track record behind me to help push my career forward. But realistically speaking, like I wasn't sure. And that's my big thing is my dad came from like, got to work for it, right? And I was always in the garage working on cars. I could turn wrenches. I could build any car. Like I've always been in the shop, one of those kind of kids. And I didn't know what was next, to be honest with you. I didn't have sponsorship after that season of Formula Renault. I did end up finishing second in the points, and I won, 11 of 20 races. But it's like there's no plan. I have no sponsors to do anything else, and what's going to
Yeah.
be next, right? So that's what's tough. The following year, actually, I took a year off of racing because we had no money and there was no like. It's just I'd never really done any marketing. You know what I mean? It's always been like have good results. In order to get good results, you need to know the car, work on the car, and then the opportunities will come. Unfortunately, this is where the time of racing is now transitioning from if you have talent, you can make it, sure, but now it's kind of changing to where you need to bring some money behind you as well. And so I got kind of caught in this weird ground where this shift is happening, and um, so took a season off and really just kind of tried to regroup and see what was out there because this is all I want to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting point you bring up, the premise of money versus talent and the increase in cost of motorsports over the last, decade or 2 decades. I think that definitely a generation in the 70s and the 80s and 90s of race car drivers had an easier go. I'm not saying they were less skilled, but they definitely were able to get a hell of a lot more seat time for a hell of a lot less money. And I think it's definitely it's an insurmountable challenge at this point. I've not figured out a way that it can work for anyone without bringing a huge sum of money to the table. The sponsors that you were working with or that were working with you when you were in kind of these lower level series, what's the benefit that they get? Is it a tax thing in one way? It's a cool thing for them to do. What do you see?
Yeah, definitely a tax thing. You get to bring people to the events and network as well. I mean, that's a thing, right? Especially at higher levels of racing, you're going to a legitimate event, and so there are other
Yeah.
heavy hitter businesses, and maybe there's somebody you want to do a business transaction with, and this is the only opportunity you get to meet with them. Um, it could be taxes. A lot of times, these businesses are involved in racing. Like I mentioned, the King Taco guys, they owned a race team, and they also own King Taco, so they just
Okay.
liked it, and they started. A lot of times, this happens, right? You see it with Stroll right now in Formula One, like. Dad owns the team, the kid's driving, but he also owns other businesses as well. That's kind of what you're seeing.
I mean, that's definitely the highest level of that example.
Yeah, right.
I feel, it's interesting because I read a lot about Stroll and like he's actually a really talented driver, He just gets shit on constantly because of his situation.
It's tough, man.
But so if we look at kind of when you were in Renault or even in karting, I guess 2006, 2007, who were some of the guys that you were racing with at that point? I mean, I'm sure some of them are now, or the IndyCar drivers, they come, give us a sense of who the class was.
Yeah, oh man, I mean, one of the first ones that comes to mind is Connor DeFilippi, who's now racing factory BMW. We were going nose to nose at it forever. Carlos Munoz, Sage Karam, these are IndyCar drivers.
Sure.
Sebastian Saavedra, IndyCar driver. You've got Gustavo Yacaman, who has his own driving school. He's done some Indy stuff as well, a lot of sports car stuff. Gustavo Meneses. There's just like a lot of really talented sports car drivers right now that came out of those series. Parker Klingerman did the Formula Renault with me. Parker did a lot of NASCAR stuff, still does NASCAR racing. Then you got like Joseph Newgarden. He came through before my time, but he was in those series. So was Marco Andretti. I remember I was teamed up with Marco Andretti for a year, but we were in different classes because he's a little older than me.
So then after Renault, what was the next phase after that? Because again,
This
you
is
were
where
on this
things
ladder
took a
system.
turn. These things took a big left turn. Pun intended here. Yeah. So it's like, what the hell am I going to do? You know, I've got no ride, I've got no sponsorship. And so we hear about this thing from the Martinez's, the King Taco guys. They're like, hey, you should look into this NASCAR thing. It's called the Drive for Diversity program. My dad's from Colombia, so I qualify for it. And basically they're looking for, you know, people of that kind of, you know, upbringing, right? Hispanics, African-American, and female drivers to get into NASCAR. And it's basically they do this huge combine. They have hundreds of applicants. They select 30 of the best resumes, and then they have them basically do a shootout for one spot on a team that NASCAR is going to fully fund for a season.
Wow. Okay.
So I put my name in the hat for that, having zero oval experience. To be honest with you, I was not a NASCAR fan. I kind of was like NASCAR, you know, I grew up road racing. I raced in Europe too in karting. I raced a couple times with World Championship, and I was like, NASCAR, yeah, it's not my thing. I'm sorry, but it's a free ride. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
as a racer, I'm going to put my name in the hat for that. And I did. And I got turned down. I got turned down because I had no oval experience. So they were like, look, if you have a hell of a resume, but if you can get a little bit of circle track experience under your belt within the next year, apply again the following year, and we'll see what happens.
And sorry, just from a time scale perspective, you're 15 at this point, or
so I just turned 15.
When you
so
say a combine, so what does that mean? They have you do a slalom course and turn like you're not running a 40-yard dash.
No, so basically what NASCAR wanted to do was to get so the first year I applied, they wanted one driver. Now the next year they wanted to build their own team. So this Drive for Diversity thing kind of blew up, and NASCAR at this time is now like, hey, we really want to put a big push for diversity, so we're going to start a team. We want a minority owner. Max Siegel owned 51% of the team. African-American guy, super involved with U.S. Olympics teams. They started a team called Revolution Racing that NASCAR was funding everything. We had Sunoco, we had Toyota, this is the whole shebang. And they wanted 4 drivers. They wanted to pick 4 drivers this next year. So in order to whittle it down from the 30 to the 4, and I guess I'll kind of rewind here real quick. I did apply the following year after getting I raced 7 late model stock cars.
Okay.
I did 7 late model races here at Shenandoah Speedway in Luray, Virginia. Like I'm talking
Dude, I've been there. I've been to Shenandoah Speedway. Yeah, I've been there. It's
epic place, man.
It's real West Virginia, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a NASCAR thing there when I was in college. I wanted to try driving a NASCAR, and I basically threw this guy $500, and he gave me like an hour and a half in this pretty powerful NASCAR. It was really fun, man.
Do you remember the guy's name by chance?
I will find it. I do not remember his name, but he was definitely missing some teeth.
Okay, gotcha. Right on.
Yeah, but real, SIGs and yeah, it was the most it was the perfect, most quintessential NASCAR thing ever, and he was real cool about it because I had no money, man. So it's like it took me a while. I got $500, did that, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to give you more track time. You're doing good. So, okay. So you have a shit ton of experience at that point in Formula cars and karting. What's it like to get into a late model NASCAR at that point?
Dude, even at that, I mean, having tested the Atlantic car and stuff, yeah, they're fast, but they're like top speed and cornering fast. They only have what 300 horsepower, maybe, right?
Yeah.
This thing has 580 horsepower, and dude, I'm like 15. I don't even have my driver's license yet, so I'm like, what the hell? This thing. It was kind of crazy, and how small that track is. They're geared for not top speed, but for torque, right? That was a challenge. I gotta be honest with you. Like getting in that thing, I was afraid of it, and I'm not gonna lie to you. I was like, this is a lot of freaking car.
Yeah. I drove a NASCAR. I went to a school in North Carolina maybe a year ago now as part of the series.
Mm-hmm.
And the hardest thing I found was judging how close you can get to the wall. It's a big mental thing, but like overall I found that to scale up to a pretty quick speed in a NASCAR is not too hard, but then to be the fastest guy is going to be really hard, right? These incremental milliseconds or seconds that you're looking for, a steep but quick learning curve, but then that end part to really be fast is just wow. I mean, just muscle memory, repetition, really hard.
And it's not even driving at that point. It comes to feel and like your knowledge of a car and what your car, like every angle of every, caster, camber, what is underneath of you, and feeling what your car could use more of, and then relaying that information and making the right changes. That's all it comes down to. All the drivers can push the car to 100%, but which driver can make their cars 100% more capable? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what it's
Okay.
about.
So you did 7-ish
Seven
races in
races,
the late
man.
model?
7 races at Shenandoah Speedway. Won 5 of them. Crazy.
Wow. That's
Yeah, and
awesome.
dude, they were putting like weight restrictions on my car and whatever. I'm sure the car might have been sheeted up. Who the hell knows? Where I'm just trying to get experience to go to this combine. So hey, won 5 late model races last year. NASCAR's like, okay, cool. We invite you to come to our combine. So there's
Yeah.
30 drivers. We go down to Charlotte, and we're running around a track called, oh man, I'm forgetting the name of this. It's a tiny little, I mean, half the size of Shenandoah Speedway, tiny.
Okay.
And this is what they do. They start you out in a Legends car, actually. So we do like 2 days of driving in the Legends cars, and they get rid of like half the people after the first 2 days. Um, and you've got guys in this combine, like Bubba Wallace is in that combine. Some really experienced, young up and coming circle track racers. Never seen a
And
road
you probably you've never driven a Legends car at that point, right? Like, yeah.
Never, never, man.
I got I'll flash a photo of a Legends car on here. But yeah, I mean that's a whole other experience, right? You're sitting in exactly in an upright position. It's like a tractor.
Yeah, they're twitchy. They're like
Yeah.
sequential shifters. It's like it kind of felt like, and you know what? I did well in it. I ended up winning the Legends. I was the fastest person in the Legends car, even faster than Bubba, and he was racing at
Wow.
that track at the time because it kind of took me back to my karting days. Super fast and twitchy, and those things were awesome. Those were
That's
really
rad.
cool.
That's rad. Okay.
So
So what was what was the second part of the combine?
so
Bigger
then they
cars?
go to, well, obviously there's other things too. It's not just driving. They want to see how you handle media. They want to see what your fitness is like. They want to see if you, I mean, they want to have this like perfect, driver essentially, right?
Yeah.
So we're doing a bunch of media interviews, like mock interviews. We're doing fitness stuff, and then it's all right. Time to jump up into a late model. I'm like, all right, cool. I've done some late model races, and so we did some late model stuff the last day, and then they finally got it down to the final 10 drivers that they wanted to continue to try for these 4 seats on a team. Okay. So I was lucky enough. I made it to the final 10. There's a TV show about this. It's called Changing Lanes. It came out on BET. So anyways, we take a month break. Mind you, I'm a junior in high school at this time. So, and then it's like, hey, you guys are going to come back for an entire month, and we're going to put you through a bunch of different competitions, and eventually whittle it down to the final 4 drivers who are going to make the team. And fortunately enough, I got selected as one of those 4. And what kind of really jump-started my career in NASCAR was the very, very last thing that they had the final 4 of us do. It was me, it was Bubba Wallace, McKenna Bell, and Ryan Gifford were the 4 of us. We went out to Irwindale Speedway in Los Angeles, and there's a race called the Toyota All-Star Showdown. Cup drivers from NASCAR come down and race it. It's an off-season, huge all-star race. And they wanted the final 4 of us to do a 50-lap shootout, just the 4 of us. The winner of that race got a chance to try to make the All-Star race. There's like 60 cars that show up for a 40-car field, so some are going home.
Okay.
I ended up winning the 4-car shootout. Freaking now we're in a NASCAR K&N series car, which is basically an old Xfinity style cup car,
Yeah,
same
it's like a
body.
proper. This is a proper race car.
Yeah, this is proper, like, this is a full blown NASCAR. I've only had like maybe 20 laps in it during the combine. This is a hell of a car. I'm like, I don't even know. I barely have driven on an oval before. And so go out to qualify for this all-star race just to see if I make it. I ended up qualifying on the pole. Joey Logano qualified second, and
Wow.
I finished second in this all-star race. Man, it was insane.
Battling with Joey Logano a lot, and that was a time of my life. I never really thought I would ever get the chance to do that. And he raced clean the whole race, and I had a blast. And coming up with a second place finish is just beyond my dreams.
Wow, that's incredible, man.
It was
That's
gnarly.
incredible.
So spent the next like 5 years consecutively running the K&N series. I won 5 races, finished 5th in the points. Was my best points finish. Had a great time, man. NASCAR paid for my racing for the first 2 years. Then the third year, I went to a team called Hattori Racing. Teamed up with like Brett Moffitt. This is now when Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott are all running, and I was able to tie for the most wins with those guys in the championship. So, man, I loved it. But then again, we come back to the funding thing, right? It's like, okay, like I still don't have money behind me. I'm catching these rides somehow just by chance and just by getting some good results, but from there, my racing full time started kind of going downhill. It's just tough to keep going at it without money behind you.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, what's the highest that you got then in NASCAR? K&N, or is that ARCA at that point?
ARCA was separate. It is now. Those series have merged. Man, when I was racing the K&N Pro Series, they were like 40 car fields every weekend. Nowadays, well, shoot, like 3 years ago before they merged, they were like maybe 10 cars in the field. It was so sad.
Really?
And it's expensive, man. Our budget was like $3 million a season.
Holy shit. Okay, yeah, that's way more expensive than I figured for NASCAR.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
This is the K&N series. This is not even talking about like trucks or Xfinity or Cup or anything. This is
Yeah. My gosh. Okay.
so
So you did 3 seasons in K&N,
I did.
2 with NASCAR, 1 you found some sponsorship for the 3rd season. Were
Yeah.
you doing just a full season, or do you have a chance to just do some races that you got some funding together for? And then at that point, are you focused almost on kind of marketing? Are you starting to get media packages together about yourself, sponsorship packages? Do you hire an agent? Is your dad working on all this stuff? How's that going?
Yeah, no help from the parents at this point, unfortunately. But yeah, this is where the media thing really started to, like, I need to get an agent. And I was working with a guy who was helping a lot of NASCAR drivers that was like, hey, look, I can work, either you pay me like $5,000 a month, or I'll work on a commission, but you're not going to be my top priority. And I was like, well, I can't pay you $5,000 a month. Sorry, dude. So that kind of was a dead end. I will be honest with you, I'm the worst. I've gotten better at it over the years now. I realize how important it is. But at this time in my life, I'm like 18, 19, 20. I'm from a tiny little town in Virginia. Like, I'm the worst networker, and I don't have a big network. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm just not, it's not my forte. I like to work on cars. I like to drive cars. And so that's really my big downfall. And I still assume that. Another thing too, I went to college during this time too. I went to Radford University. So my focus was just all over the place. And I really, looking back, wish I didn't go to Radford in that prime time of my career.
Why? What do you think? I mean, if you could have gone back, what do you think you could have done differently at that point? It sounds like college is a pretty solid hedge to have at that point. It opens a lot of paths for you that gives you some kind of foundation, right?
For sure. And that's the thing. It's always backup plan. Look, my mom's a teacher.
Yeah.
Realistically speaking, like, who gets to actually make it in racing, right? In my brain, like, I'm on the right path. I've had a success at every level. It's like I'm not thinking about anything else but this. But, I got to be realistic. And there's always that. I don't have, again, I don't come from money. So
Yeah.
I got to be realistic about it. And that's why I went to school. Yeah, backup plan. Absolutely. And I can race while I do that. Sure. I was racing in the K&N series full time while I was at Radford. And dude, I missed my finals week, and I ended up having to just stop. I had to stop going to college because of it.
Okay. Well,
So,
what? All right. So, like, in college at that point, then what are you thinking? Like, you're like, all right, I either got to get I've got to find whatever $2-3 million of funding to push through this career. I need to, or what? Like what's plan B at that point? Where's your head at?
Dude, honestly, and my brain is not even on the funding. I wish it would have been. It was
Yeah.
more so, where can I get a ride that's just, I don't have to worry about bringing sponsorship. I know there are teams that have money out there that need a good driver. So, like, where do I find that? I think that's going to be easier for me than finding $2 million. Like, that's not
But
realistic.
you're also at that point, just kind of doing the math, in 2008, 2009, coming out of one of the more difficult financial times in American history, right?
Yeah, true.
I mean, the economy's bouncing back, but I'd imagine finding racing sponsorship for anyone at that point would have been rather difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, now when I'm looking for NASCAR sponsorship, so I ran under NASCAR's dime 2010, 2011, 2012, had a full sponsored ride. 2013 is where I was like, oof, man, I don't know what to do. 2012 was my last year at Radford. I did a year and a half. I did 3 semesters. And then I was just like, you know what, this is too much to balance. I got to make a decision here. Ended up moving to California and raced the K&N West Series. They had a West Division series of K&N. And ran for a team that was sponsored by Napa, and it was Bill McAnally Racing. I only ran like 5 or 6 races. It just wasn't the right thing, man. For NASCAR racing, the East Coast is where it's at. That's where all the teams are. Everyone's in Charlotte, and it just felt like a huge step backwards.
Do they do more road courses in the West Coast series, or is it all ovals?
There's a lot of really short track ovals. We did do Phoenix, but yeah, like Sonoma, you're running. Brainerd, Minnesota, epic road course. Epic road course.
Well, would you crush it on the road courses then in the NASCARs? Because I mean, that's your forte, right? That's your background at this point.
Yep, absolutely. And so that led me 2013. I was like, hey, look, this is great. I appreciate it, but I need to do something back east. And so I actually moved back home in 2013, about halfway through that season, and I was like, man, what am I gonna do? I've dropped out of school. I just left my current race team. And I went to Summit Point and just watched a race and ended up leaving that day with a job as an instructor. All military, law enforcement, government.
Oh, at their they've got kind of the training grounds there, right? For advanced driving. For it's like the Secret Service goes there, and that's cool, man. That's very cool.
So I get a gig doing that. I worked 2 classes. Boom, my phone rings. Got an opportunity, full season in the K&N series again, 2014. Let's go. Free ride. Let's go.
How's that happen? How's that happen?
Phone call, man. It's just like, you're a free agent. Again, I was doing well. 2011, I set some, I was tied for the winningest driver in a stacked field of now Cup champions. I mean,
sure.
Ryan Blaney, people saw that I could do it. It's just like, man, I need an opportunity. And thank God people believed in me. So I got this ride. 2014, I went full time. It was a rough year though. It wasn't the best team, but we had some decent races. I think I won 1 race. I won Columbus. And then the following year, 2015, no ride again, back to Summit Point instructing.
Kind of going through your head at this point, you're 19, let's say. Are you frustrated? Are you like,
big time.
You're hitting a wall a little bit, right? Kind of what are you thinking? Like, what are you feeling? There's a certain level of resilience you have to keep pushing through this, because you've had so much success at that point of your career, and it's like, well, for fuck's sake, man, what do I do, right? What do I do?
At this point, I'm realizing like I need to get money behind me. I need to get funding, and I'm watching my my fellow racers that I grew up racing with start like winning the 24 Hours of Daytona with a team, or they're going to Xfinity series and racing, or even Cup at that time, and sure. I'm like sitting here at Summit Point, like, cool, it's awesome that I'm teaching like secret people how to drive, but like I want to be racing on Sunday,
Yeah.
So yeah, there was some frustration there, and I guess realistically, again, at that time I just wasn't putting enough effort into finding money. More so it was like looking for a ride, and that's my biggest mistake. I should have been looking for the funding. Yeah. I just found it so overwhelming, and I didn't know where to start. I couldn't afford to pay an agent. Like, I was just kind of stuck. Yeah,
and I think do you think today that if you had like social media, or there's just a much more scalable way to find funding? I'm not sure that it's easier. I just think it might be a little more approachable, or you can market yourself.
This is a time where, like Instagram just came out. I think I signed up for Instagram in 2012, maybe.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
And I mean, shit, that's when my racing career is starting to like taper off a little bit, you know? So I'm just like,
Sure.
man, weird timing. It's just
Yeah.
weird timing.
Yeah. Luck and timing, man. So much of it. So, all right. So what's the next phase after that? And also, before we go there, explain to me real quick. This is interesting. The stuff that you were doing as an instructor at Summit Point. I mean, you're literally teaching Secret Service guys how to do advanced driving techniques. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
Summit Point, just for everyone knows here, right? It's like an hour and a half from DC. It's the nearest racetrack to DC. You got a lot of government agencies around there, and Summit Point has an entire driving facility, right, about precision driving, essentially.
So Summit Point, imagine this, right? Summit Point, most people see it as a racetrack. It is not that. Summit Point is a training facility that just so happens to have some racing on the weekends. Like there are 4 road courses. I've got one of the 4 road courses that we have on my wall behind me here, but Monday through Friday is where that place thrives, man. It is every racetrack is full. There's training, there's off-road training, there's firearms training, there is, I mean, you name it. Like the list goes on. It's unbelievable what happens there. I had no idea about this, right? And I mean, like again, I was telling you earlier, I was sneaking into the place when I was 12 just to get some laps in a Formula Renault. But circle back and get the chance to teach there, like I was like, man, this is really freaking cool. And you know what the best part about it was? I wasn't racing at the time, but this is where my skills is enhanced like tenfold. I was on a racetrack every single day, every day. And I still am. I still work there. And I now have my own company and I work at other places too. But man, getting time on a skid pad, that is the best thing anyone can do.
So, all right. So what kind of where you at then? So you're 19, 20-ish, we'll call it. Things,
Yep.
you're out of money. You got a lot of talent left, but you're out of money. One runs out before the other usually. Where are you at then? What's next?
So what was next was this. Kind of do this part-time work at Summit Point. You know, I'm not a full-time instructor. It's just like a part-time gig.
Yeah.
A couple courses a month kind of thing. And I was working low-level stuff. I'm not working like the super high-level, executive protection classes or anything. But like I said, my phone rang 2014. I moved back to Charlotte, did a full season down there. 2015, now I'm back. I'm 21 at this point. Got no degree, no ride. So I ended up getting a full-time instructing job at Summit Point. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'm going to network with somebody here at the racetrack. There are track days. People bring nice cars. I might be able to find the right person, hit it off with them, maybe do some private coaching for them, maybe jump back into sports cars that way. I don't know. But like my mind is still set on like, I need to, at this point, find some money. Hey, and on the plus side, I've got a really fun job that, paid decent, and I'm at a racetrack every day enhancing my skills. So I'll stick with this for a little bit. And I was doing that for a few years, and then I kind of somehow stumbled into a gig with Aston Martin. That's how I met Andrew. And so I did that almost full time from 2019 to 2020.
Was that through an agency they hire?
No, so this was just the luck of the draw. One of the engineers for Aston Martin Americas, who does like technical issues, he is from Winchester. Ironically, he went to Virginia Tech, and his dad was the lead instructor at Summit Point at the time. And he's like, hey, Dad, we're doing this corporate track day for Aston Martin Americas, and we're looking for some driving instructors. Like, would you suggest anyone from Summit Point? He's like, I'll suggest one person. And he's like, Sergio, do you want to do this?
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, yeah, hell yeah, let's go. So I go out to Irvine, and they treated me amazingly. And I got to play in Aston Martins for like a weekend, and I was like, this is freaking awesome. I don't think anything come of this.
It's like living the dream right there at that point. Because usually when OEMs are doing driving events, they hire all the instructors through an agency. There's 2 or 3 major experiential driving agencies in the United States. But to be able to contract directly with the OEM is a huge bonus in that case.
Oh,
it gives you a lot more power down the road.
So they ended up putting me on a retainer for 2019, and I went on the road full time with Aston Martin, helped them. I went over to the factories in the UK, helped them with the DBX prototypes. And that's led to now I drive all the hot laps in the Americas for like the Pirelli hot laps for Formula One races.
Yeah. I've seen the Instagram videos of you kind of drifting around a bit, and you're putting on a show, man. That's
so
awesome.
much fun. So much fun. So that was a huge plus. You know, I still do that. You know, I'm going out to Miami in 2 weeks. We're going to do a big thing for Cognizant for the F1 sponsor.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's awesome, man. That's a hell of a story. So did you ever think, when you were kind of at that inflection point with your NASCAR career, do you try to get back into sports cars? Do you ever look down that route? Do you see yourself still maybe, figure out a way to get to the Daytona 24 or do some sports car racing?
No, to talk more about sports car stuff, the Aston Martin of Washington, D.C., the dealership here, they have a GT4 Vantage that raced in Europe last year.
Yeah.
I've been to Summit Point with that thing like 4 times, testing it, shaking it down. And John Metcalf, I'm trying to get him to start a race team. Come on, he's the owner of the Aston Martin dealership.
It sounds like you have a potentially like a very interesting opportunity with you're still such a young guy. You've got a pretty interesting background now as an instructor. You've got the relationship with Aston. So you said you're doing some pro instructing now as a school. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So one day I'm at work. I'm at Summit Point and my phone rings and caller ID was like an unknown caller kind of thing, military base, whatever. I answer it. And basically, somebody had taken a driving course, and they wanted me to put on a course for them myself. And it was a group of guys, and I was like, are you talking like coming back to the school here? Like, no, we want you to come put a course on for us. And just by, kind of same thing, luck and working hard and look, man, that's one thing. Like, sure, it's discouraging to not be racing full time. Like, I still try my best in everything I do. I think that's like a racer's mentality, right? It's a competition. Like, I want to be the best instructor. I want to be, the best always. And I started a driving school down in North Carolina at Rockingham Speedway.
Nice. Okay.
Being one of the biggest bases we have in the U.S. is Fort Bragg, is right down the road. So I'm really close to a military base, and I have, an awesome network there to be able to train. Yeah, Rockingham's an oval with a road course inside, and then we've got, they have 300 acres there. So when I have the track, I have all 300 acres to do whatever.
Wow.
So basically, what we do is I have police Crown Vics, police Interceptor Explorers. I've got like a bunch of manual transmission Mustangs. I've got Ford Taurus police cars. And then I have a fleet of just junk cars that we can destroy. Like, dude, we spray paint them up. We run into it's epic. It's so much fun.
But what are these? Is this military training at that point, or this is just it's a driving school that anyone can sign up for?
No, this is exclusively military training. Training. So, so I work with the U.S. Army and then a couple of different government agencies as well.
Sergio, thank you so much again. And
thank you, Cole. This has been an awesome opportunity and making me like relive so many memories here. This is really awesome. Thank you.
I'd love to keep in touch. And
yeah, for sure. Let's do it.
Yeah, maybe we can do some driving stuff together at some point.
Come down to North Carolina. You come down anytime.
I got to Andrew. Andrew's not far from there now either. So
I know he's right up the road. Let's get you and Andrew down to North Carolina. Seriously, we'll do some pit maneuvers, some J turns.
Oh, it'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Right on, man. Thanks a lot, Sergio.
Take care, Cole. See you, man.
Yeah.